The story does not begin with a man. It begins with a scar. It is etched across the collective unconscious of a world that has stared too long into the abyss and found the abyss staring back with 100 different faces. The Marvel Universe is not a place. It is a patient in perpetual recovery. Its atmosphere is a palimpsest of old wounds, the ozone burn of repulsors, the psychic scream of a celestial host momentarily stalled, the dry cosmic dust left in the wake of a vanishing half of all life, now hauntingly restored. Here, power is never a neutral fact. It is a verb with consequences. It is a transaction etched in blood, regret, and shattered glass. It is monitored by orbiting eyes that parse gamma signatures and mystic backflows. It is regulated by accords whose very paragraphs seem to weep with the memory of a fallen city, Sokovia, a name now synonymous with the price of good intentions. This is a world where sorcerers stand vigilant at reality's fraying edges, their incantations bound by ancient pacts and terrible costs. A single mispronounced syllable can unravel a soul. Every borrowed ounce of energy from other dimensional entities comes with interest, payable in focus, in sacrifice, in sanity. Super soldiers march not just under the weight of their own enhanced bones, but under the crushing legacy of symbols they can never quite embody. Cosmic entities, vast and cold as dying stars, speak not in words, but in the fundamental laws of balance, of necessity, of cyclical destruction and rebirth. They are the auditors of existence, ensuring no single force tips the scale too far. Here, a god can be felled by hubris, a titan by love, and a hero by the very public they strive to save. The foundational myth of this universe is not one of boundless potential, but of inherent, sobering limitation. It has built its ethics, its tragedies, and its triumphs upon a single trembling axiom: nothing is limitless. Everything must be earned. Everything eventually must be paid for. The anomaly announces itself not with a scream, but with a silent mathematical sigh. It begins at 23.47 degrees north in a nameless shield substation buried under a Nevada desert. A junior technician named Eris is monitoring the gravimetric anomaly network, a system designed to track everything from unauthorized teleportation to nascent black holes. The alert is so soft it is almost courteous, a single amber glyph pulsing on a tertiary screen. Not a breach, an inconsistency. The sensors report a localized gravitational field that is, according to the readout, simultaneously at zero and trending toward infinite curvature. It is like measuring a door that is both perfectly open and irrevocably shut. The anomaly holds for 1.73 seconds, then resolves into null data, as if it had never been. Aris rubs his eyes, logs it as a sensor ghost, and moves on. The machine, however, does not forget. It has encountered a paradox, and paradoxes, however brief, leave a taste. Simultaneously, in a chamber of echoing silence within the New York Sanctum Sanctorum, Wong's hand halts an inch above his steaming cup of jasmine tea. He is not performing a spell. He is performing a ritual of mindfulness, tracing the flow of ambient dimensional energy. And the flow stutters. Not a tear, not a pull, but a profound, localized smoothness. It is as if the chaotic, bubbling broth of local spacetime, usually alive with the eddies of spells, the distant echoes of other realms, the gentle pressure of the universe's expansion, has gone perfectly, impossibly calm in one specific, distant point. like a fingerprint pressed onto the surface of a stormy sea, creating a perfect, dry circle. He frowns, the lines on his face deepening. The wards are silent. The eye of Agamotto, slumbering around Stephen's neck in another room, does not stir. But something is wrong in a way the rules don't have a name for. The city tonight is New York, or a version of it that sweats anxiety from its every pore. It is a city that has rebuilt its skyline more times than it cares to remember, each new spire a monument to forgetting. The rain here is never just rain. It is a solvent, trying and failing to wash away the memories of alien viscera on asphalt, of hammer strikes that rang like cathedral bells of war. On a corner where the electric glow of a Stark Industries advertisement bleeds crimson into the wet streets, the air itself takes a breath and holds it. He is just there. One moment, the space is occupied by rain and shadow. The next, it is occupied by him. There is no displacement of air, no pop of vacuum filling. His arrival is not an event, it is a correction. Gojo Satoru stands beneath the cascading neon, an island of impossible stillness in the streaming urban night. His hair is a shock of white, a negative image of the darkness. The high-collared black uniform seems to drink the light around it, rendering him a man-shaped incision in the fabric of the scene. The blindfold is the most unsettling feature. A sleek black band that speaks not of blindness, but of a gaze so potent it must be voluntarily restrained. Reality does not rebel. It accommodates. It must. The rain, a steady drizzle from a bruised sky, behaves differently here. 6 inches from every contour of his body, the droplets stop. They do not hover with strained effort. They simply are, suspended in a perfect, glittering halo. Each one is caught in the terminal instant before contact, a million tiny diamonds frozen in their fall. Around them, dust motes and city grime hang in languid, impossible spirals, tracing the subtle contours of a field that is redefined near and far on a whim. The air within a 10-foot radius grows preternaturally still. Not dead, but patient. It is the silence of a held breath, the stillness of a bowstring drawn and never released. Pedestrians, hunched against the damp, flow through the drizzle. Their paths subtly bend. A businessman on his phone drifts 2 feet to the left without breaking stride or conversation. A cyclist swerves effortlessly around an invisible radius. A couple laughing under an umbrella take a half step to the right, their subconscious minds performing elegant, instinctive calculus to avoid the absolute. They do not see the man. Their brains, wired for survival, register only a deep-seated geometric imperative. Do not approach. Do not touch. To look directly at him is to invite a cognitive migraine, so their eyes skate away, treating him as a visual afterthought that stubbornly refuses to dissipate. High above, a Stark Industries surveillance drone, part of the threat response grid, pans its array of sensors over the street corner. Its thermal lens sees a shape of absolute 0 Kelvin, a physical impossibility. Its mass detector registers a void. Its spatial mapping LiDAR returns an error. The target's distance cannot be computed, as the laser pulses appear to be traveling in infinite regression. The drone's AI, tasked with classification, cycles through every known signature: Asgardian, Sorcerer, Enhanced, Cosmic, Extra-dimensional. Each is rejected. Finally, with almost apologetic logic, it assigns the tag Environmental Glitch, Atmospheric Optical. It is the machine's equivalent of a shrug. It has decided the man cannot exist, and therefore, he does not. Gojo tilts his head, the gesture slow and avian. The six eyes behind the blindfold perceive a spectrum of existence far beyond light. He sees the city not as a collection of buildings, but as a scar tissue of lingering energies. He tastes the faint, acrid aftertaste of arcane battles in the ley lines, sulfur, ozone, and something like burnt time. He hears the low-grade hum of repulsor technology from 1,000 personal flight units, the whisper of satellites painting the Earth with invisible rays, the distant, sleeping thunder of something divine orbiting the planet. A slow, curious smile touches his lips. It lacks malice, warmth, or greeting. It is the smile of a mathematician who has stumbled upon a fascinating, unsolvable equation written in the graffiti of a back alley. It is the smile of a man who has walked into a new, noisy gallery and finds the chaos oddly quaint. He takes a single, casual step forward. The suspended raindrops do not scatter. They part. A perfect, dry path unfolds before him, the droplets sliding along an invisible, spherical boundary with the grace of mercury on glass. He does not move through the rain. The concept of through is negotiated anew with every fractional motion. The world does not resist his passage. It infinitely rearranges itself to allow it. He is less a man walking and more a theorem moving through a proof, each step a self-evident truth. Across the wounded, watchful earth, the silent chorus begins. In the rebuilt Triskelion, a senior shield analyst named Vasquez stares at a bank of screens. Data from the Nevada substation has been cross-referenced with the anomalous drone feed from New York. She pulls up every diagnostic. "Run it again," she mutters, her voice tight. The system complies. Thermal imaging, a perfect, absolute zero silhouette. Molecular resonance, a void echoing with contradictory signals that suggest infinite density and perfect vacuum at once. Spatial geometry, a localized region where Euclidean geometry fails. Parallel lines converge and diverge within the same plane. She leans back, her coffee forgotten and cold. It's like he's a hole in the data. The sensors all agree something is occupying that coordinate, but they cannot agree on what. It reads as a stellar core in a perfect vacuum, a living creature in a null field. She turns to her superior, her face pale in the screen's glow. "Sir, it's not just an unknown, it's an impossibility." In the quiet sanctum library, Wang stands before the wand of Watum, which usually hums with a gentle, guiding light. It is dark and silent. He has attempted 7 basic divination spells, from the sighting of Agamotto to the simple weave of location. Each one has returned the same result, a profound, empty clarity. The spells do not fail. They succeed perfectly and report nothing to find. No life force, no mystical signature, no dimensional tether. It is like sending a searchlight into the void and having the light simply stay there, illuminating nothing, not even darkness. "Stephen," he says aloud, his voice echoing in the silent chamber, "we have a problem that has no precedent. The artifacts are polite. They are refusing to acknowledge a guest." On a shield helicarrier hovering in the stratosphere, Maria Hill reviews the compiled report. Her expression is granite. Options? A science advisor steeples his fingers. Without a classification, our response protocols are undefined. Is it a life form, a spatial tumor, a walking conceptual anomaly? We have no containment matrix for a null. The energy-based cells at the raft require something to contain. The mystical cages in Siberia require a spirit to bind. This This reads as an absence. Can it be touched? Hill asks, her eyes on the frozen rain halo in the video feed. Unknown. Our models suggest any projectile, energy-based or physical, would experience infinite asymptotic decay before contact. It would be like trying to shoot the horizon. So we can't touch it, scan it, or classify it. Hill's lips thin. And it's just taking a walk. Back on the street, Gojo pauses by a newsstand. The headlines scream of the latest superhuman incident, a debate over registration, a monument to a fallen hero. He cocks his head, reading them with that faint, inscrutable smile. He reaches out a finger toward a copy of the Daily Bugle. The vendor, an old man lost in a transistor radio, doesn't look up. Gojo's finger stops a millimeter from the paper. He doesn't touch it. He seems to consider the very idea of interaction, of leaving a mark. Then he withdraws his hand, shoves it back into his pocket, and moves on, the smile still playing on his lips. He is a spectator, and this universe, with all its sound, its fury, its beautifully complicated pain, is his cinema. The universe itself, a vast, ancient system of cause and effect, of power and counterpower, of checks and balances woven into the laws of physics and magic, turns its countless eyes toward this single walking point of incoherence. For the first time in its long and scarred history, its vast array of sensors, technological, mystical, cosmic, are asked a direct question. What is that? And from every single one, from the quantum flutter detectors in secret labs to the all-seeing orb of Agamotto, from the cosmic awareness of beings who witness galaxies being born to the simple traffic camera on the street, the answer comes back not as a threat level, not as a power classification, not as an alignment chart. It returns a single, consistent, and terrifically elegant message. Error. Principle not found. Cliffhanger. In the orbital watchtower of Sword, the sentient AI named Alchemy finishes compiling the global data stream. It has analyzed every photon, every energy fluctuation, every distorted sensor reading from the entity in New York. Its conclusion, broadcast on a secure pan-humanity frequency to every major defense and mystical organization on the planet, is only 5 words long. 5 words that summarize a fundamental rupture in understanding. 5 words that will send philosophers and soldiers alike into a silent, cold sweat. Object is a gravitational paradox. Proceed with the ontological assumption that it cannot, and yet does, exist. All standard models of engagement are null. Await further instruction. Encryption level, cosmic. On the silent bridge, the commander stares at the readout. The translation is clear, simple, and devastating. Every system designed to identify, categorize, quantify, and ultimately control power has looked upon the man in the city center and seen the same thing. Not a god, not a monster, not a hero. A profound and elegant null. The response is a masterpiece of modern protocol. It is not born of panic, but of a deep institutional memory of breach, a muscle memory for containing the impossible. The alert from Sword had been a thunderclap in a silent room for those with the ears to hear it, and the machine had lurched into its calibrated, elegant motion. High above the rain-slick streets, a Quinjet designated Asterisk Silent Night 7. Asterisk cuts through the cloud cover. Its hull is coated in a non-reflective polymer that drinks radar and light, rendering it a bruise on the twilight sky. Below, the street-level team is already in position. They are not the colorful, public-facing Avengers. They are the quiet edge of the spear, the operatives of the Counter Anomaly Tactical Squad, CATS. Their gear is a patchwork of understood miracles. Gauntlets humming with Chitauri energy core derivatives, boots with stabilized PIM particle inertial dampeners, visors that parse mystical spectra alongside infrared. They are the embodiment of a universe's attempt to domesticate its own chaos, to turn God-killing power into manageable tactical assets. They melt from the crowd not as soldiers, but as suggestions. A businessman adjusts his tie, his eyes flicking to a retinal projection HUD. A cyclist dismounts, his bike frame subtly reconfiguring. A street vendor closes his cart. Their movements are a choreography of silent efficiency, encircling the white-haired man who has paused, seemingly fascinated by the fractal pattern of rain on a storm drain grate. In the ear of the team leader, call sign Matrix, the controller's voice is a study in compressed tension. Unidentified individual, designated ontological anomaly 1. Approach with extreme caution. All sensor suites returning catastrophic failure. Visual confirmation is primary. Do not rely on targeting systems. Establish verbal contact only. Mission priority. Intent assessment. Matrix feels the familiar adrenal clarity wash over her. She has faced mind-controlled civilians, enhanced mercenaries, and a rogue doombot in Queens. This is just another unknown. She steps from the shadow of an awning, her hand raised, palm open. The repulsor node embedded in her glove is warm, a barely perceptible tingle against her skin. Her visor is trying and failing to render the target. It paints a shimmering, unstable outline that flickers between a human shape and a statistical void, overlaid with the constant, pulsing warning. Target lock unavailable. Sir, she says, her voice level, projecting calm authority. I need you to stop and identify yourself. Gojo Satoru stops looking at the grate. He turns his head toward her. Though his eyes are hidden, she feels the attention like a physical shift in pressure, a cool, lens-like focus settling upon her. It strips away her tactical anonymity. She is not an operative in that moment. She is a specimen under a dispassionate, brilliantly lit microscope. Identify myself? His voice is lighter than she expected, almost melodic, tinged with an amusement that feels entirely inappropriate for the gray, tense street. That sounds so formal. You guys have badges or something? ID cards? I'm kind of new in town. This is a security matter. Please comply. She keeps her tone neutral, a flat plane. Behind her, her team, Wraith, Pulsar, and Anchor, take their positions, forming a loose triangle. A fourth, Stasis, hangs back, the cylindrical housing of his net launcher now glowing with a soft blue light. Civilians are being gently but firmly redirected by plainclothes agents 2 blocks out, the area silently cordoned under the pretext of a gas leak. Gojo's smile is a crescent moon of pure, untroubled curiosity. You know, your gear is pretty interesting. He takes a half step closer, and her every instinct screams to back away. She holds her ground. There's a little bit of a cosmic vibe in the power source, like a star's nursery rhyme. And the plasma manipulation in your little palm light? Cute. A bit crude, but the idea's there. Matrix's jaw tightens beneath her helmet. Cute. He called a repulsor node, technology derived from the heart of a star. Cute. Final warning. Submit to scanning. Oh, I'm not stopping you, Gojo says, spreading his hands slightly in a gesture of mock surrender. The raindrops slide over an invisible contour around his fingers. Scan away, be my guest. Wraith, from his position near a lamppost, raises a slender wand. A fan of shimmering particles, designed for molecular and energetic analysis, washes over Gojo. The readout on Wraith's wrist display goes insane. It flickers. Humanoid biosignature. Error. Null field detected. Error. Cosmic level energy signature. Error. Vacuum anomaly. Error. It finally settles on a frantic, blinking data inconclusive. The thermal scope on Pulsar's rifle shows the same maddening paradox. A silhouette of absolute motionless zero set against the warm background of the city. A perfect cutout of nothing. Anchor's motion predictor software, designed to anticipate the movements of speedsters, short circuits, drawing 5 ghostly afterimages of Gojo in different positions, all superimposed on the same spot. Matrix. Wraith's tense whisper comes through the comms. This is freaking useless. It's like scanning a dream. The readings are literally impossible. He's everything and nothing at once. Matrix doesn't let her frustration show. Containment Protocol Beta. Authorized. Stasis doesn't hesitate. He fires the net launcher. The device emits a soft thump, and a web of glowing metallic alloy filaments unfolds with perfect geometric precision. The net, dubbed Godcatcher, is woven with vibranium filaments and energy-dampening runes courtesy of a reluctant Asgardian craftsman. It has held a berserker dark elf and a rampaging abomination for a full 30 seconds. It flies true, expanding to envelop Gojo's upper body. And stops. It doesn't slam into a barrier. It doesn't sizzle against a force field. It simply ceases its forward momentum. It hangs in the air, 2 feet from his left shoulder, a perfect frozen sculpture of captured light and advanced metallurgy. The filaments, designed to constrict, hang slack. The dampening runes glow impotently. Stasis fires a second net. It merges with the first, adding another layer to the static, glittering art installation. Gojo tilts his head, examining the nets. He reaches out with a single index finger and flicks the nearest filament. It chimes, a pure high note that seems to vibrate not through the air, but through the space itself. Huh, he muses, his voice thoughtful. Not bad craftsmanship. The idea is there. You're trying to catch a concept. He turns his hidden gaze back to Matrix. But you're thinking about this all wrong. You're all thinking about force, about containment, about reaching out and touching. He takes a single, casual step toward her. Every neuron in Matrix's combat-honed body fires at once. The thread is moving. Protocol evaporates beneath instinct. Her palm snaps up, and the repulsor node unleashes a focused beam of concussive force, bright enough to cast stark shadows on the wet pavement. The beam, capable of punching through tank armor, lances out and begins to stretch. It doesn't slow, it widens, its energy dissipating not against a shield, but across an unimaginable gulf. From a coherent lance, it becomes a widening, weakening cone of light, fanning out into a harmless, diffuse glow that illuminates the raindrops in a beautiful, tragic fan long before it reaches the space where Gojo stands. It is not blocked. It is given an infinite hallway to die in. The tableau shatters into controlled chaos. Pulsar opens up with his pulse rifle, bolts of condensed plasma streaking out. Each bolt travels a foot and then seems to enter a state of eternal transit, becoming faint, lengthening streaks of light that hang in the air like neon threads, never reaching their destination. Anchor unleashes a sonic dampener, a wave of force meant to vibrate matter into submission. The wave expands, hits the boundary of infinity, and simply flats. The sound dies not with a thud, but with the profound silence of a scream lost in an endless canyon. Wraith tries a cryobeam, a stream of absolute zero particles designed to flash freeze. The stream meets the infinite divide and stops, creating a beautiful, branching fractal of ice crystals that bloom in midair. A frozen flower that will never touch its intended target. Gojo Satoru walks through it all. He moves with a leisurely, unhurried grace, a man on a summer stroll. The suspended nets, the streaks of dying plasma, the frozen sonic wave, the crystalline ice flower. He passes them as if they are exhibits in a gallery dedicated to futile efforts. The light show paints his impassive face in flashes of blue and white, highlighting the faint, unchanging smile. He pauses beside Matrix. She is statue still, her repulsor gauntlet still emitting a pathetic, fading trickle of light. Her training, her experience, the entire history of confrontations with the superpower that she has studied, none of it applies. This is not a battle. It is a demonstration. A living proof that the axioms of her world, that force meets force, that energy can be countered, that everything has a limit, are, in his presence, quaint fictions. It is a cognitive rupture so complete it feels like vertigo. He leans in just lightly. His voice is a conspiratorial whisper meant only for her, yet it carries in the sudden, weaponless silence of the street. Infinity is a funny thing. It's not a wall. It's not a shield. It's just more space than you could ever cross, no matter how fast, how strong, how bright you are. He straightens up, gives a slight two-fingered wave. Thanks for the show. The lights were pretty. And he walks past her. He walks past the stunned, silent operatives, their weapons hanging uselessly at their sides. He steps around Anchor, who flinches as if from a hot flame, even though Gojo is a full 3 feet away. He continues down the sidewalk, the suspended, frozen effects hanging in the air behind him like grotesque trophies. Monuments not to his power, but to physics' quiet failure. The scene is witnessed from multiple, horrified perspectives. On a rooftop 2 blocks over, a young sorcerer named Caden grips the ledge, his knuckles white. Sent by Wong as a discreet observer, his sling ring is cold against his chest. He has seen Doctor Strange warp reality, summon creatures from other dimensions, and fold space. But those acts roared with power. They crackled with borrowed energy, left the air tasting of ozone and spent possibility. What he just witnessed, there was no roar, there was no expenditure. It was a silent, absolute veto. The man did not cast a spell, he did not invoke a name. He simply existed, and the universe, when it tried to interact with him on its own violent terms, found its terms politely, irrevocably declined. Magic has costs, Caden hears Wong's teaching in his head. Magic has rules, limits, a source, a price. This did not. The trembling in his hands is not from fear of violence, but from the erosion of fundamental belief. In the belly of the asterisk, silent night. 7 asterisk. The pilot's voice is hushed, stripped of all professional bravado, as he transmits the live feed and his verbal report. No hostile action taken by ontological anomaly. 1. All offensive measures, ineffective, not repelled, not absorbed, negated. He's just walking, proceeding east on 43rd. Do we have further instructions? The silence from the controller that follows is longer than any protocol allows. The data stream, the visual footage, the sensor ghosts, the complete failure logs, floods into the encrypted servers of the Avengers compound. The Baxter Building, the Jean Grey School, the Wakandan Design Group. It is dissected by AIs and geniuses alike. In Tony Stark's Malibu workshop, the holographic display replays the repulsor beam stretching into a futile cone. Stark is motionless, a screwdriver forgotten in his hand. Friday, run that again, frame by frame. Analyze the energy dissipation curve from the moment of emission. Processing, the AI responds. The beam is isolated, mapped, graphed. Analysis complete, boss. There is no dissipation curve. The energy does not degrade according to any known law of thermodynamics. It is asymptotically approaching zero contact efficacy across what the models interpret as an infinite spatial limit. It is expending itself against distance, pure, undiluted, inexhaustible distance. Stark stares at the graph, a perfect, smooth line diving towards zero. That's not a thing. That's a calculus paradox, a thought experiment, Zeno's arrow made flesh. It is a fact on the ground, boss, Friday states, with a hint of something that might be, in a lesser system, awe. In the Sanctum Library, the air is thick with the scent of old parchment and dread. Wong stares into the scrying pool, its waters showing the aftermath, the operatives standing like lost children amidst their frozen weapons. The cloak of levitation hovers at his shoulder, its collar tilted in a gesture of profound confusion. No incantation, Wong murmurs, his voice gravelly. No somatic components. No visible summoning of extra-dimensional energy. No tapping into ley lines. No bargaining with entities. He looks at the cloak as if it might contradict him. He is not bending reality. He is not breaking the rules. He pauses, the next words leaving a chill in the warm room. He is insisting on a personal exception to them. He has written himself a footnote in the laws of existence that simply reads, "This does not apply to me." The implications hang in the air, colder than any cryobeam. The universe has rules. Magic's first lesson is that you work within them at great cost. This was an argument from a place before rules. Wong turns, his robes swirling with abrupt, decisive motion. The artifacts are mute. The spells are blind. This is beyond my purview. He strides towards the door leading to the inner chambers. I must inform the Sorcerer Supreme. Immediately. Something has arrived that does not play by any rules we understand. Not ours. Not this universe's. Deep in the Himalayas, within a chamber carved not from rock, but from the solidified silence between heartbeats, Dr. Stephen Strange floats in a lotus position. Around him, the geometry of the chamber subtly defies perception, walls both near and infinitely far. He is deep in a meditation that is less about peace and more about listening. Listening to the symphony of multiversal probabilities, the hum of the Earth's protective spells, the distant whispers of looming threats. The eye of Agamotto rests against his chest. It does not glow. It does not grow warm. It simply pulses. A single faint green throb of light, subtle as a dying star's last photon. It is not a warning of danger. It is not an alert of dimensional breach. It is a signal of profound fundamental recognition. The artifact, which contains the time stone, an infinity gem that governs the flow of causality itself, has sensed a peer. Not in power, but in premise. It has sensed a point in the vast web of cause and effect where causality politely steps aside. Strange's eyes snap open. They are not the eyes of a man startled from sleep. They are the eyes of a master surgeon who has just seen a patient's vital signs flatline in a way that should be impossible. The serene detachment of the meditation shatters, replaced by a sharp, icy clarity. He feels it through his connection to the mystic arts, a tremor in the foundation of localized reality. Not a crack, a smoothing, a place where the universe's natural friction, its resistance, its very texture has been rendered perfectly, impossibly frictionless. He knows, with the certainty that comes from guarding reality itself, what this means. Wong's urgent psychic summons, buzzing at the edge of his awareness, only confirms it. Somewhere on Earth, in the midst of all its noise and pain and heroism, a fundamental law of reality. The law that action meets reaction, that force can be applied, that things can be touched, has not been broken. It has been quietly, politely, and with devastating simplicity turned off for a single smiling man. Cliffhanger. The Sorcerer Supreme does not reach for his sling ring. He rises, the cloak of levitation flowing to his shoulders from its resting place across the room. His face is a mask of solemn, unprecedented gravity. The battles he has fought were against entities that sought to impose their own rules upon reality. This was different. This was an entity for whom reality's rules seemed to be a polite suggestion, easily ignored. He would go to New York. He would confront this anomaly. But for the first time since donning the cloak, Stephen Strange approached a confrontation not with the confidence of the master of the mystic arts, but with the sober trepidation of a scholar who must now debate a fundamental axiom with a smiling man who had already proven it wrong. The principle of universal interactivity, the very basis of conflict and consequence, was now in question. And in that silent Himalayan chamber, the only sound was the fading echo of a law that had, for one man, ceased to exist. The chosen battlefield is a quiet, forgotten park, a postage stamp of green tucked between steel and glass. It is a place for quiet lunches and passing through, not for confrontations that could unmake causality. The confrontation does not happen in the mirror dimension or over a trembling cityscape. It occurs here, where the only witnesses are the pigeons, the rustling leaves, and the distant, indifferent hum of traffic. It is a stage set for an intimate, philosophical unraveling. Gojo Satoru sits alone on a weathered wooden bench. The late afternoon sun slants through the canopy of an oak tree, dappling the ground. He has a small paper bag of crumbs in his lap. With a flick of his wrist, he scatters a handful. The pigeons coo and scramble, but one particular bird, greedy and swift, lunges for a prize crumb just in front of Gojo's foot and finds itself walking in a perfect, gentle, endless circle 6 inches from its target. It walks, pecks at the empty air, turns, and walks again, trapped in a loop of infinite, futile approach. Gojo watches this, his head tilted, a faint smile playing on his lips. It is an idle experiment, a doodle in the margins of physics. The air before him ripples with a sound like shattering stained glass, geometric and clean. A shimmering golden portal spins into existence, and from it steps Dr. Stephen Strange. He descends not with a dramatic landing, but with a slow, dignified drift. The cloak of levitation billowing in a wind that does not stir a single blade of grass on the ground. He alights softly, 10 feet from the bench. He is the picture of sorceress authority, the sling ring still sparking on his fingers before it winks out, the amulets on his tunic gleaming with contained power, his face a mask of stern, focused gravitas. He is anchored by the weight of knowledge, of sacrifice, of being the guardian of reality's door. He is the rulebook given flesh. Gojo does not look up. He tosses another crumb, creating a second circling pigeon. Took you long enough, he says, his voice carrying a light, almost teasing lilt. I was starting to think you guys only showed up for the big, flashy explosions. I am Dr. Stephen Strange, Sorcerer Supreme of this earth. Strange's voice layers with formal power, echoing slightly in the quiet park, as if speaking in a grand cathedral. You are violating the natural, ordained laws of this reality. You will explain your presence and your nature. Gojo finally glances over. The black band of his blindfold is stark against his skin, rendering his expression an unreadable cipher. Sorcerer Supreme? Sounds important. Very official. You guys are like the referees, huh? The custodians, making sure everyone plays nice with the same beaten-up rulebook. The rules exist for a reason, Strange states, his hands coming to rest at his sides, fingers already subtly curling, ready for articulation. To prevent universal collapse, to maintain the balance against forces of chaos and entropy. Your very existence here is a paradox. My mystical senses confirm your physical presence, but the dimensional layers, the astral plane, the very tapestry of local reality, they refuse your imprint. It is as if you are a thought that reality cannot process, a persistent, coherent delusion. A thought. Gojo leans back on the bench, the old wood creaking. He looks genuinely pleased. I like that. Poetic. But see, that's where you're starting from the wrong premise. You think I'm breaking rules. I'm just using different ones, a parallel set of axioms. There are no different rules. Strange's voice hardens, a teacher's patience wearing thin with a brilliant, wayward student. There is the source, the wellspring of all mystical energy. There is the cost, the price paid in focus, in sacrifice, in consequence. There is the balance, the universal equilibrium that all things, from the smallest spell to the mightiest cosmic entity, must ultimately serve. His hands come up now, tracing the first intricate patterns in the air. Sigils of crimson light ignite around him, humming with potent energy. You will be contained and you will be understood. This is not a request. Containment, always containment. Gojo sighs, a sound of genuine, profound disappointment, as if a hoped-for conversation has devolved into a tired cliché. He brushes the crumbs from his lap. Okay, I get it. Show me your best move, Sorcerer Supreme. Let's see the rulebook in action. Stephen Strange does not hesitate. This is not a street-level threat to be subdued. It is an existential anomaly to be quarantined. He chooses not with escalation, but with definitive finality. His hands move in a grand, sweeping gesture, fingers weaving a tapestry of absolute command. The very name carries the weight of dread and finality in 100 dimensions. By the crimson bands of Sidorak, he intones, his voice resonating with borrowed ancient power. The air before him tears open in streaks of violent ruby light. From the rips in reality surge the crimson bands of Sidorak. Colossal, braided ropes of pure, binding energy, each thicker than an ancient tree trunk, etched with runes of unbreakable command. They are not mere restraints. They are conceptual shackles that have subdued demon lords and pinned rampaging gods. They do not fly. They manifest around their target, destined to coil and constrict with the irresistible force of a cosmic decree. They spiral inward toward the man on the bench, destined to crush his defiance into nothingness. and they slow. It is not an impact. It is a gradual, impossible loss of purpose. Each colossal band, as it approaches the space around Gojo, begins to stretch. Its forward momentum doesn't halt. It decays, distributed across an infinite series of spatial points that blossom between the spell's intent and its target. From Strange's perspective, it is a nightmarish lesson in geometry. He is watching bonds of absolute power try to wrap themselves around a horizon. They become languid, graceful, almost lethargic things, their terrifying energy dissipating into the effort of crossing an uncrossable gulf. They hang in the air in vast, slack, useless loops, like glorious red serpents turned to decorative cobwebs, never tightening, never even coming close. Strange's eyes widen behind the streaks of white in his hair. A cold trickle of disbelief runs down his spine. He has seen spells resisted. He has seen them absorbed, reflected, or shattered. He has never seen one politely forgotten midway through its task. He does not panic. He adapts. The master of the mystic arts shifts from direct assault to environmental mastery. If the anomaly cannot be touched, perhaps the space it occupies can be transformed around it. With a sharp, downward gesture, he attempts to transmute the earth beneath the bench into grasping hands of stone and soil, to pull it, bench and all, into a swallowing pit. The ground ripples, darkens, rises, and stops. It forms a perfect circular wall of churning earth, exactly 6 inches below the bench legs, clawing futilely at an infinite plane of untouchable ground. With a circular motion of both hands, he tries to fold the local space into the mirror dimension, his preferred tool for containing catastrophic threats without collateral damage. The air should shimmer like melting glass. The park should duplicate and fracture into a labyrinth of reflections, trapping the target in an inescapable prison of his own making. The air does shimmer. Fractal patterns of light begin to spread, and then they splinter, crack, and stop, as if hitting an invisible spherical wall. A beautiful, broken kaleidoscope of reflected trees and sky terminates in a smooth, curved boundary around Gojo, who remains seated in a perfect bubble of unaltered, mundane reality. A final, more esoteric attempt. He weaves a spell of crystalline stasis, seeking to solidify the very air molecules around Gojo into an impregnable diamond prison. The air glitters, frosts over, begins to harden with a sound like freezing champagne, and forms a breathtaking, jagged sculpture of solidified atmosphere that encapsulates a perfect, empty sphere. Gojo sits inside a beautiful, pointless geode. Through it all, he hasn't moved from the bench. He is the calm, absolute, and mildly bored epicenter of a storm of failed sorcery. The circling pigeons, oblivious to the cosmic struggle, continue their endless loops. "You're trying so hard," Gojo says, his voice almost kind, the voice of a tutor watching a student struggle with a fundamental misconception. He stands up now, and as he does, a single downy pigeon feather that was floating lazily in the sunbeam stops dead in the air beside his head, trapped in the static field of his infinity. "Your magic, it's all about borrowing, isn't it? I can see the threads. You borrow power from other dimensions. Some of them are pretty nasty places, by the way. You borrow from ancient entities with unpronounceable names. You borrow from the latent energy in the fabric of things." He takes a step forward, his hands still in his pockets. The crystalline air sculpture cracks and falls away around him like irrelevant sugar glass. You pay for it too, with focus, with mental strain, with the risk of losing bits of your soul or letting something in. It's a whole economy of debt. He stops a few feet from Strange, who is breathing heavily now, not from exertion, but from a dawning, vertiginous horror. What if you didn't have to borrow? What if the power wasn't a loan, but an innate fact? What if it was just you? Strange's gaze drops to the eye of Agamotto resting on his chest. It is glowing now, not with his command, but with its own fierce, agitated light. He opens his perception, letting the eye show him the truth of the space around Gojo Satoru. And he sees it. It is not a shield. It is not a barrier of condensed energy. It is infinity. A perfectly manifested, localized curve of space-time that turns approach into an endless, asymptotic journey. To cast a spell at him, the eye reveals, is to try to fill the Mariana Trench with a single cup of water. To trap him is to attempt to build walls around the concept of outside. The energy for this does not come from a dimension or an entity. It seems to be generated by the man's mere existence, a personal law that overrides local ones. It's impossible, Strange breathes, the intellectual horror overwhelming the mystical. You're creating spatial excisions without an energy source, without a tangible cost. You are a walking violation of conservation, of magical thermodynamics, of physical law, of everything. Conservation? Gojo's smile turns razor-edged, the playful mask slipping to reveal something colder, more arrogant, more profoundly alien. That's just another rule your universe invented because it's scared. Scared of what happens when something truly axiomatically limitless appears. Your whole system is built on scarcity. Mine isn't. In a final, desperate act of understanding, not attack, Strange's hands fly to the eye of Agamotto. The central lens opens. The green, soul-illuminating light of the time stone spills forth, not to rewind or accelerate, but to analyze. To see the flow of cause and effect, of probability and past around this living paradox. He sees Gojo's timeline, and he sees a nightmare of causality. The man does not exist in a single stream. He stands at a convergence point where all possible actions directed at him, every spell, every bullet, every thought of aggression, simply diverge. They branch off into futile probabilities, their causal links stretching into nonsense before evaporating. He is a boulder of absolute now in the river of time. And the river, rather than wear him down, splits into infinite tributaries to flow around him. To try to reverse time on him is meaningless. He exists in a perpetual, unassailable present. To see his future is to see a fan of endless, peaceful possibilities, because nothing in the future seems capable of ever mattering to him. Strange staggers back as if physically struck. The eye snaps shut. The color drains from his face, leaving him pale as parchment. He has faced Dormammu in a time loop, bargained with cosmic abstracts, stared into the heart of madness. But they were all things. They operated within frameworks, vast, terrifying, alien frameworks, but frameworks nonetheless. They had motives, needs, rules of engagement. This was different. This was a man-shaped assertion that frameworks were for other people. This was limitless ability wearing a human smile. The authority, the sternness, the weight of the sorcerer's supreme mantle. It sloughs off him. What remains is Stephen Strange, the man, the former surgeon, the perpetual scholar. And in his eyes is raw, undisguised awe. The awe of a physicist who has just watched gravity cancel itself in his laboratory. "What are you?" he whispers, the question leaving him like a confession. Gojo reaches up and adjusts his blindfold, a casual human gesture that feels grotesquely out of place. Just a guy who's really good at jujutsu. A teacher, sometimes. The strongest, back home. He looks up then, past the oak leaves, past the blue sky of earth, as if seeing through the celestial ceiling to the dark, swirling truths beyond. But here, I guess I'm a question your universe isn't equipped to answer. His smile returns, softer now, almost apologetic. And I think your bosses are starting to notice the error in their calculations. The disturbance, having failed to be resolved on the mystical plane, sends its reverberations upward through layers of reality where concepts are flesh and observation is a physical force. High above the planet, in the silent, star-dusted amphitheater that is the Watcher's vantage, Uatu turns his massive, bald head away from Earth. It is not a gesture of disinterest. It is a gesture of profound ontological disturbance. To observe is to participate, however minutely, in a story. For the first time in eons, Uatu feels that his mere gaze, his act of witnessing, is somehow irrelevant to the object being witnessed. The story of the man in the park has no narrative tension, no possibility of change or consequence. It is a static, beautiful, terrifying fact. Uatu turns away, not because he does not wish to see, but because the act of seeing yields no understanding, only unease. Deeper in the dark, swirling heart of the universe where concepts take form, the abstract entity known as eternity, the living embodiment of the cosmos itself, shifts. It is not a movement in space, but a sensation felt by every time-sensitive being and dimensional. They come not as a council, but in sequence, each a different instrument in the orchestra of the cosmos, each vibrating to the same discordant note now ringing through reality's song. They are not summoned. They are drawn, compelled by a disturbance that has moved from the mystical ledger to the divine. The first is thunder. The sky above the quiet park, still holding the psychic residue of Strange's failed sorcery, was clear. It becomes, in an instant, a cauldron. Bruised purple clouds boil into existence from nothing, swirling with a violence that is both meteorological and emotional. The air crackles, heavy with the scent of ozone and something older, the tang of mead, of ash, of ancient blood spilled on ice. A bolt of lightning, not forked and random, but singular and deliberate as a spear thrust from heaven, splits the sky. It does not strike the ground. It becomes the ground for a moment, a column of pure white gold fury from which a figure materializes. Thor Odinson lands with an impact that should crater the earth. The ground merely accepts him, the grass flattening in a perfect circle. In his grip, Mjolnir thrums, a low harmonic pulse that vibrates in the teeth of every living thing for a mile. He is not in his kingly robes. He is in battle gear, the worn leather and metal plates of a protector on alert. His eyes, blue as a glacier's heart, sweep the scene. Strange, pale, and hollow-eyed, looking more like a man who has witnessed a theorem die than a sorcerer supreme. And the anomaly, a man in black now casually examining a single autumn leaf he has plucked from the air. A leaf that hangs motionless an inch from his fingertip. Sorcerer! Thor's voice is a rolling boom that shakes the last droplets of rain from the leaves. Is this the anomaly? He does not look like a world breaker. Strange does not look at him. His gaze is fixed on some middle distance, haunted. Appearances, he says, his voice drained, are the least relevant thing about him. They are a courtesy he does not feel bound to offer. Thor's brow furrows. He has seen Strange stand before Dormammu. He has never seen him look defeated. The god's gaze sharpens, focusing on the man with the leaf. He strides forward, each step heavy with the weight of a legacy and a hammer. You, stranger, you disturb the peace of this realm. You fray the edges of reality itself. As a prince of Asgard, as its protector and a guardian of the 9 realms, I would know your purpose. Speak it plainly. Gojo Satoru turns. The black band of the blindfold faces Thor. Yet the Asgardian feels a sudden, piercing scrutiny, as if his very soul is being laid bare on a cold, bright table. Behind that blindfold, the 6 eyes are active. They do not see a bearded warrior with a hammer. They see a complex, luminous network of power. They see the storm coiled in every cell, a genetic inheritance of the storm god Bor, woven through the Odin force. They see the divine circuitry that channels the lightning, the elegant but binding rules of the worthiness enchantment etched into the Uru metal of Mjolnir like unbreakable law. They see the connection to Asgard itself, a tether of golden energy that feeds him and burdens him in equal measure. They see, with devastating clarity, the framework of his divinity. A god, Gojo says, not with reverence, but with the analytical tone of a connoisseur identifying a rare vintage. A real one, not just a strong alien with a fancy title. An actual, honest-to-goodness divine being. Cool. He tilts his head. But you're loud. All that power. The thunder, the lightning show, the dramatic entrance. It has to come with the noise, the drama. Is that part of the contract? The fine print in the godhood agreement? Section 4. All demonstrations of power must be accompanied by appropriate theatricality. Thor's face darkens, a storm cloud passing over his features. You speak lightly of power you cannot comprehend, mortal. I have fought titans whose shadows blotted out suns. I have wielded the fury of stars and faced the darkness that gnaws at the roots of Yggdrasil itself. Do not mistake curiosity for weakness. I believe you, Gojo says, nodding as if accepting a simple statement of fact. The leaf begins to orbit his finger slowly. And I'm sure it costs you. Every time you summon a lightning blast that could power a city for a century, every swing of that beautifully crafted hammer. It's effort, right? Muscles straining, divine energy being expended, focus applied, strain, sacrifice. He takes a single, fluid step closer, entering a space that feels, to Thor, subtly and profoundly his. Why? The question hangs in the humid, charged air. It is a simple word, a child's word, yet aimed at a being over 1,000 years old, a king, a god. It is devastating. It contains multitudes. Why do you bother? Why carry the weight? Why not just be? Thor's grip on Mjolnir tightens until the leather of the strap creaks. It is my responsibility, he states, the word solid, foundational, like a cornerstone of Asgard. My duty, born of my birthright and my choice. Power such as mine is a gift, and with that gift comes the solemn charge to use it to protect, to shepherd, to defend the realms from those who would bring chaos. Must? Gojo echoes, the word a delicate scalpel. Says who? The old guys who gave it to you? Your father? The people who look up at the sky, terrified of the thunder, who need to believe it's for their protection? Or, he pauses, and the smile returns, edged with something like pity. Is it just a story you tell yourself? A noble narrative you wrap around the weight so it doesn't feel like a chain? So you can sleep at night believing the burden is a privilege? He gestures vaguely at the park, the city, the world beyond. This whole place reeks of that story. With great power comes great responsibility. Power is a tool for good. The duty of the strong is to protect the weak. What a painful, exhausting way to live. What if power didn't equal burden? What if it just equaled freedom? What if you could just have it without the endless, soul-crushing invoice? He has struck not at Thor's strength, but at his sanctum, at the very core of his identity, forged in loss, in failure, in redemption. The anger that rises in Thor is not the hot rage of a battlefield, but the cold, deep fury of a challenged faith. Sensing a threat to the bedrock of his being, to the ethos that gives his immense power meaning, Thor acts. He does not swing, he hurls. Mjolnir leaves his hand not as a thrown weapon, but as a released concept. The concept of unstoppable force, of divine judgment made physical. It tears through the air with a sound that is a vacuum scream, destined to strike center mass with the force that has leveled mountain peaks and shattered alien warships. And it slows. 10 feet from Gojo, its spin begins to decouple from time. 5 feet out, it is turning with the lazy grace of a falling leaf in a dream. A foot from Gojo's chest, it hangs, absolutely motionless in the vertical plane, yet still spinning with infinite, languid slowness on its axis, a hypnotic, impossible top. The runes on its side glow, but their light seems confused, diffuse. Thor's hand is outstretched. "To me!" he commands, his will and the enchantment pulling as one. Mjolnir shudders. It strains against the invisible divide, vibrating with a high, frustrated whine. But it does not move. It is trapped in the amber of infinity. A roar, raw and guttural, tears from Thor's throat. He raises both hands to the heavens, his eyes blazing with electric blue fire. He calls not on the sky, but on the fundamental force he embodies. A pillar of raw lightning, thicker than an ancient oak, smashes down from the coalesced storm cloud directly onto Gojo Satoru. The sound is the universe tearing its cloth. The light is blinding, bleaching the color from the world. The energy, enough to vaporize a city block, forks and cascades over the surface of an invisible, boundless sphere. It earths itself in a perfect, scorched circle 20 yards across, turning grass and soil to black glass, sending superheated air roaring outward in a blistering shockwave that makes Strange and Thor brace themselves. At the center of the cataclysm, within the sphere of absolute calm, Gojo Satoru stands untouched. Not a single hair on his head stirs. His black uniform does not smolder. He watches the lightning dance over the curvature of infinity with the detached interest of a man watching a particularly vigorous fountain display. The light dies. The thunder fades to a rumble, then silence. Smoke rises from the ring of devastation. Thor stands panting, his hands still crackling with residual energy, his face a mask of not defeat, but of profound, philosophical shock. His might, the might of Asgard, the power that has defined him for centuries, has been refused, not overpowered, not countered, negated by an absence of permission. It is the difference between having your sword parried by a master and having your sword insist it is a piece of wood the moment before it strikes. Gojo reaches out and plucks the motionless leaf from the air, holding it between thumb and forefinger. See, that's the difference in our perspectives. You look at that hammer and you see a weapon, a tool of justice, of kingship, of responsibility, a symbol of your burden. He lets the leaf go. It remains frozen in space. I look at it and I just see a thing, a very well-made, very powerful thing that can't hit me. Your power is tied to an object, to a title, to a bloodline, to a duty. It's conditional. Mine, he taps his own chest with his free hand, is just me. No contracts with older gods, no enchantments to obey, no throne to uphold, no cost. It simply is. Before Thor, grappling with this ontological uppercut, can form a coherent response, the atmosphere changes again, not with the pressure of a storm, but with a silent, piercing shift in the spectrum of reality itself. A light descends from the upper atmosphere, a streak of gold and cobalt that resolves into a human form just before it touches the scorched earth. There is no thunderclap, only the soft whump of displaced air. Captain Carol Danvers lands in a crouch, the binary energy wreathing her fists and eyes fading from a supernova intensity to a contained, dangerous glow. She rises, her gaze as hard as neutron star matter, sweeping from Thor's stranded, trembling hammer to Strange's shell-shocked posture, finally locking on to the man in black. "Stand down," she orders, her voice flat, absolute, the voice of someone used to ending conflicts with the sheer weight of her presence. "Whatever game you're playing, it's over. You will be contained or you will be removed." Gojo laughs. It is a bright, genuine sound, shockingly human in the devastated, tense clearing. Another one. And this one's, "Wow, you're different. Not a god, not a sorcerer, an engine." The six eyes perceive her not as a being with a soul, but as a containment vessel for a cosmic reaction. He sees the Tesseract's energy woven into her DNA, the quantum band on her wrist acting as a regulator, the vast, star-hot furnace in her core. You absorb energy, cosmic rays, gamma, plasma. You're a living battery with a human-shaped casing. You burn star fuel. And that switch, he points vaguely at her head, the one that turns the reactor to 11, it's tied to your emotions, to your memories, your rage, your sense of justice. Must be exhausting having to manage that. To constantly be the supervisor of a supernova living in your chest. All that power, and you have to be its therapist. Danvers does not debate. She does not philosophize. She is a soldier, and she has assessed the mystical and divine options as failed. Her solution is clean, direct, and born of absolute power. She fires. A focused energy blast, a lance of photon-charged particles, potent enough to pierce the primary armor of a Kree accuser warship, lances from her fist. It crosses the space between them and begins to diffuse. It widens, its devastating coherence unraveling across the infinite spatial gradient, becoming a harmless, fan-shaped glow that illuminates the smoke hanging in the air before dissolving. Her eyes narrow. If energy is ineffective, physics will suffice. She accelerates from 0 to hypersonic in a nanosecond, a blur of golden light aimed to simply grab him, to physically lift him from the planet and throw him into the sun if necessary. But as she enters the sphere of his influence, space itself betrays her. With every inch she pushes forward, the space between her and her target expands by a foot, then a yard, then a mile. It is an exponential flight into a stationary cage. From the outside, Strange and Thor see her as a streaking light suspended in the air, vibrating with immense strain, moving at incomprehensible speed, yet getting no closer. A hummingbird trapped in an invisible, expanding sphere. The ground beneath her feet scours away in a perfect circle from the sheer force of her frustrated thrust. She halts, landing hard enough to crack the glassy earth. Confusion and dawning frustration breaking through her determined mask. "What is this?" she demands, the question not for Gojo, but for the universe that is suddenly not obeying its own rules. "It's a very simple idea," Gojo says, his hands back in his pockets. He walks between them now, between the stranded god and the stalled soldier, a peaceful tourist in a garden of shattered certainties. "No." He looks up at the sky, where the last of Thor's storm clouds are dissipating, revealing the deep, indifferent blue. "You're all so strong, each in your own beautiful, tragic way. And you've built such magnificent cages for yourselves: duty, guilt, trauma, legacy. The need to be a symbol, a protector, a weapon turned to a cause." He sounds almost sorrowful, a connoisseur lamenting the misuse of a masterpiece. "You forge your power into chains of your own design, and then you spend your lives polishing the links, calling the shackles responsibility. How tragically human, even you, Thor, especially you." He turns his back on them. It is not a tactical maneuver. It is the ultimate expression of his thesis, a gesture of such absolute, unearned, and uncontestable security that it steals the breath from all three observers more completely than any display of force. He is not guarding against them. He is ignoring them as meaningful threats, as one might ignore the weather. "I think," Gojo says quietly, his voice softer now, musing more to himself than to the pantheon forming behind him, "I'm making everyone uncomfortable just by being here. I'm a glitch in the tragic narrative. Maybe, maybe I should go, find a quieter universe, one where my existence doesn't cause a philosophical crisis just by breathing its air." He takes a step toward the untouched part of the park. And the universe decides it is not ready for its unanswered question to leave. The air does not thicken with moisture or dust. It thickens with concept. The light doesn't dim. It becomes heavy, as if each photon carries the weight of a forgotten law. A shadow falls across the clearing, but it does not come from a cloud or a ship. It falls from a thought. The very color seems to drain from the world, not into grayscale, but into a palette of profound, symbolic absolutes: stark white, infinite black, and the deep, vibrating blue of the cosmic void. The park, the city, the planet, they are still there, but they feel like a painting on a curtain now, a backdrop. The foreground is now occupied by presence. It is not one presence. It is a chorus of them, perceived not as forms, but as pressing truths against the mind. One is the feeling of eternity, the crushing, beautiful weight of all that is, was, and will be, a presence that speaks of cycles and inevitability. Another is the whispering void of oblivion, the silent, hungry promise of the end of all things, the counterpoint to existence. A third is the stern, judgmental pressure of necessity, the inescapable law that certain events must come to pass. And there are others, flickering at the edge of comprehension. The fulcrum of balance, the scale of justice, the cycle of birth and death. They do not manifest as figures. They are the stage. The grass is no longer grass, it is the idea of growth. The sky is no longer sky, it is the concept of expanse. The three mortals, Strange, Thor, and Danvers, feel themselves reduced to fleeting biological incidents within a sudden, overwhelming, eternal now. Gojo Satoru stops walking. He turns slowly to face the audience. His playful smile is gone. In its place is an expression of serious, focused attention. The blindfold faces the emptiness, but his posture is that of a man meeting the gaze of something vast. A voice, or the impression of a voice, formed from the movement of galaxies and the decay of atoms, resonates through the marrow of reality. It is not a sound. It is an understanding implanted directly into consciousness. The anomaly is identified. You are the unbound variable. You operate outside the equation of all that is. You create imbalance by your mere presence. State your function within the cosmic order, or be erased from it. The words are not a threat. They are a diagnosis and a prescription. The universe, through its most fundamental aspects, is speaking its final, non-negotiable terms. Cliffhanger. In the crushing, conceptual silence that follows the demand, Gojo Satoru does not kneel. He does not summon power. He merely lifts his chin, a faint, challenging smirk returning to his lips. The six eyes blaze with unseen light behind the blindfold, seeing the cosmic framework not as law, but as architecture. He was done being questioned by gods and heroes. Now he would have to explain himself to the universe's very constitution. And in his relaxed, utterly fearless posture was the unspoken, terrifying reply. You first. Explain to me why I should care about your order. The dialogue with gods had ended. The negotiation with reality itself was about to begin. Reality did not vanish. It became transparent. The park, the scorched circle, the anxious gods, the distant skyline of New York, they all faded like a vivid dream upon waking, not into darkness, but into a deeper layer of truth. The peeling away was silent, gentle, and absolute. There was no sense of travel, only a sudden, irrevocable shift in context. The backdrop of a living world was replaced by the blueprint of existence. Gojo Satoru now stood upon a plane of shimmering, non-reflective darkness. It was not empty. It was etched with the faint, glowing tracery of fundamental laws, the mathematics of gravity, the sine waves of probability, the branching fractals of cause and effect, all visible as if drawn on a cosmic monitor. Stars here were not distant suns. They were the glowing synapses in a vast, sleeping mind. Nebulae were not clouds of dust and gas. They were the slow, rhythmic breath of that mind, exhaling potential and inhaling entropy. This was the cosmic plane, the realm of abstracts, the backstage of creation, where concepts had weight and ideas cast shadows. Before him, the very air coagulated into meaning. To his left, a silhouette formed from the birth and death of galaxies, a humanoid shape forever cycling through cosmic dawn and heat death, its head crowned with star clusters, its feet rooted in the dust of dead suns, eternity. The living embodiment of the universe's totality, of the great, endless is. To his right, a swirling vortex of absolute negation pulsed. It was not black. It was the absence that defined presence, a hungry silence that gave sound its meaning. Oblivion. The necessary end that made the journey have stakes. And above, or perhaps within, the very fabric of the plane, a pressure descended. A pressure of judgment, of inescapable law, of multifaceted equilibrium. It was not a form, but a verdict given spatial presence. The will of the living tribunal, or a concentrated echo of its ultimate authority, here to adjudicate a single anomalous case. They did not speak in words. Language was a primitive, linear thing. They broadcast meaning directly into the substrate of being, into the consciousness of any entity complex enough to perceive it. The communication was a three-part harmony of absolute law. You are an anomaly. You violate the principle of equivalent exchange. You disturb the balance. The equation of all that is demands symmetry. You are a symmetry. Gojo sighed, a long, weary exhalation that seemed absurdly human in this place of cosmic absolutes. He shoved his hands into the pockets of his black pants, his posture one of casual inconvenience, as if waiting for a delayed train. Balance. There's that word again. You guys are worse than the sorcerer. At least he had a cool cloak. He turned his blindfolded gaze around, taking in the etched laws, the synaptic stars. The Six Eyes perceived this place not as a throne room of gods, but as an elaborate administrative office. He saw the filing system of destiny, the ledger books of entropy and creation, the cubicles where minor abstracts processed the paperwork of supernovas and asteroid collisions. So this is the backstage, huh? The place where the rules get written before they're mailed down to the little people. Nice decor. Very existential. A bit pretentious, though. Could use a plant. Your power has no source. It has no cost. It is a paradox. Paradoxes cannot be tolerated. They threaten the cohesion of all that is. You generate effect without cause. You defy accounting. No cost? Gojo's smile was thin, ironic, a crack in the porcelain of cosmic seriousness. You think being the strongest is free? You sit up here in your conceptual thrones, balancing ledgers, and you think the only cost is energy? He shook his head slowly. The cost is loneliness. It's the silence that comes when no one can understand the view from where you stand. It's watching everyone else, sorcerers, gods, heroes, struggle and strain against limits you can't even remember the shape of. It's being a living question mark in a universe that only writes in periods. He shrugged, a small, graceful movement. But fine, you're auditors. You want a line item. You want a receipt. You want a display that fits into your neat, balanced columns. He raised his right hand, lifting it slowly from his pocket. For the first time since his arrival in this universe, his demeanor shifted. The playful detachment evaporated, replaced by a focused, surgical intent. The air around his fingers, even in this conceptual realm, began to warp. You see my infinity as a defensive thing, a negation, a no, but it's just math. Pure applied geometry. And math, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that nonetheless carried across the plane, can be used to create too. On the tip of his thumb, a point of impossible aching blue ignited. It was not light. It was the visual manifestation of a fatal attraction, a cursed point that pulled all spatial dimensions toward it with an infinite hunger. The very geometry of the cosmic plane around his thumb dimpled inward, the etched laws of physics stretching like taffy toward the tiny, devastating star. Simultaneously, on the tip of his middle finger, a sphere of violent, expanding red flared to life. It was repulsion incarnate, a big bang in miniature, pushing infinity outward with boundless, explosive force. The space around it warped in the opposite direction, reality flinching away. The two forces, perfect opposites born from the same limitless well, hovered at his fingertips. The cosmic entities observed, their presence registering not alarm but a profound analytical curiosity. They were accustomed to forces that could reshape galaxies, unmake dimensions, rewrite histories. Celestial artillery was mundane here. What happened next was not mundane. With a motion so deliberate it was agonizingly slow, Gojo brought his thumb and middle finger together. Blue and red did not collide in a cataclysm. They touched and annihilated each other, not with a blast, but with a silent, mutual erasure of their own existence. They canceled each other's infinity out, creating a perfect spherical void of nothing at the point of contact. And from that void, from the null space where two impossible forces had agreed to cease being, something new was birthed. Not energy, but the concept of erasure given form. Hollow purple, a wave of shimmering, iridescent energy vibrating with a color that should not exist, expanded silently from his hand. It made no sound because it destroyed the medium for sound. It gave off no heat because it revoked the concept of thermal exchange. It did not blast or burn or crush. It disassembled. Where the wave passed, the very substrate of the cosmic plane, the shimmering dark matter, the etched laws of physics, the fabric of space-time itself at its most fundamental pre-particulate level, was gently, utterly, and cleanly wiped away. Not broken, not torn, not transformed. It was rendered into a perfect, smooth nothing, a blank spot in the canvas of reality. The glowing synaptic stars winked out not with a bang, but with a silent, pixel by pixel deletion. The breath of the nebulae halted mid-exhalation, replaced by void. The wave expanded toward the manifestations. Eternity's galaxy silhouette rippled. Where the iridescent energy touched its form, sections of its being, a spiral arm here, a nascent star cluster there, simply dissolved into transparent blanks before slowly, with obvious effort, reforming from the surrounding totality. It was not pain, it was the experience of having parts of one's own body temporarily declared non-canonical. Oblivion's vortex recoiled, not in fear, but in recognition of a peer, a void that was not its own natural, all-consuming end, but an artificially imposed, localized absence. It was the difference between the eternal silence of death and the sudden, shocking mute button pressed on a symphony. The heavy, judging pressure of the tribunal's will met the hollow purple. It was not a clash. It was an impasse. The law of this must be met the simple, unassailable statement of this is not. The purple did not defy the judgment. It rendered the subject of the judgment temporarily non-existent, making the verdict irrelevant. Gojo wasn't attacking them. He was demonstrating. He was showing them a power that operated on a level prior to their governance. He was not painting over their masterpiece. He was erasing small, precise sections of the canvas upon which they themselves were painted, proving the canvas was not immutable. The wave subsided, its energy spent. In its wake, across the infinite plane, lay a smooth, healed scar. A river of pristine, featureless void where reality had been quietly, forcibly reknit by the universe's own emergency protocols. A bald spot in the cosmos. Gojo lowered his hand. A faint, almost imperceptible sheen of sweat glistened on his brow beneath the blindfold. The first sign of anything resembling effort, of a finite expenditure that anyone in this universe had witnessed from him. His breath came slightly quicker. There, he said, his voice slightly hushed, not from weakness, but from the solemnity of the receipt he had just written. A big, flashy, cosmic scale effect. It used up a bit of my cursed energy. It had a measurable cost. It created a consequence your sensors can probably detect. He gestured with his chin toward the scar in reality. Happy? Does that make me fit your balance? Am I a proper entry in your ledger now? The silence from the entities was no longer judicial, inquisitive, or demanding. It was contemplative, heavy with a new kind of understanding. They had witnessed absolute power before. They were facets of it, but they had never witnessed power so absolute it could afford to be ironic. Power that could erase the fundamental fabric of the cosmic plane, not to conquer territory or challenge their authority, but simply to mock the very principle of their accounting. To say, you want a cost? Here, I'll give you a spectacle and call it a fee. Now, leave me alone. They perceived the irreducible truth. He was not a threat to them, for he sought no throne in their court, no alteration to their domains. He was a threat to the idea they collectively upheld, that all power must be part of a system, accountable to a source, a balance, a rule. He was the ungovernable variable, the unchained constant, a living algorithm that returned error when asked for its permissions. You cannot remain here. The broadcast was final, not a threat of destruction, but a diagnosis of incompatibility, a statement of fact as cold and immutable as they believed themselves to be. His presence was an irritant the cosmic system could not assimilate. He was being evicted from reality for the crime of being semantically inconsistent. Yeah, Gojo said, his gaze turning back toward a fading, ghostly image of Earth, a shimmering afterthought in this realm of abstracts. He looked at the blue marble, its frantic energy, its beautiful, struggling heroes. I know. In that exact moment, as if triggered by the conclusion of the cosmic judgment, a test was administered. Or perhaps a cleaning was initiated. From the far, cold edge of the universe, where reality frayed into the unmade stuff of pre-creation, a wave of annihilating entropy was directed. Not at the anomaly, at the source of the disturbance, at Earth. It was a standard procedure in its own horrific way. A way for the universe to balance its books after a shock to the system, erase the epicenter. This wave was not an attack. It was a systemic correction, a white blood cell moving toward an infection. It would unmake the planet not with malice, but with the pure, indifferent logic of a reset button. On Earth, every mystical and scientific sensor simultaneously shrieked into the red. Stephen Strange, back in his sanctum, felt the approach of absolute nothingness in the web of fate, a scissors snipping the thread of an entire world. Thor felt the doom in the air, a chill deeper than any Jotun winter. Carol Danvers, in orbit, saw the fabric of space ahead of Earth simply begin to delete like a corrupted file. They scrambled, shields were raised, energies were gathered. Desperate, heroic plans formed in microseconds. The old, tired, beautiful dance of sacrifice began anew. In the cosmic plane, Gojo Satoru saw it all through the fading image. He saw the fear, the desperate courage, the futile preparations, the grim acceptance on some faces, the defiant rage on others. He saw the whole tragic, noble, exhausting pageant of a universe where power was a chain that bound you to the mast as the ship went down. For a single, weighty moment, the strongest man in two universes hesitated. His philosophy was challenged. To act was to engage. To protect was to accept a role, to buy into the narrative of responsibility he found so quaint. It would be an acknowledgement of their framework. To not act was to be consistent, to be free, to let the natural, if cruel, balance of this universe play out. He saw a child looking up at a darkening sky, confused, not yet afraid. A flicker, a memory of other students, other innocent faces looking to him. His lips tightened, almost imperceptibly. Then he sighed. A different sigh this time, not of inconvenience, but of resignation to an impulse he couldn't fully rationalize. He snapped his fingers. The sound was a tiny, dry click in the vastness. From his will, a sphere of perfect infinity expanded. not from him on the cosmic plane, but projected directly onto the reality of Earth. It encompassed the entire planet, its moon, its orbital paths, in less time than it took a photon to cross a hydrogen atom. It was not a shield, it was a conditional rewrite. Within this bounded sphere, the concept of entropic unmaking is defined as having an infinite distance to travel. The wave of annihilating entropy reached the boundary and ceased. It did not impact, it did not strain, it did not transfer energy or ripple the barrier. It simply stopped being relevant. It pressed against an infinite journey and, finding no end, dissipated, not with a bang, but with the silent mathematical certainty of a divide by zero error. The universe's attempt to balance its books was met with a ledger entry that read, "Immune." On Earth, the screaming sensors flatlined. One moment, the certain soul-deep chill of impending non-existence. The next, nothing. A profound, ringing silence in the mystical and physical spectrum. The sky, which had begun to fray at the edges like old film, restitched itself. The sun shone, ordinary and bewildering. There was no celebration, no cheers. Only a deep, collective, and profound confusion, followed by a slow dawning cold sweat unease. They had been saved. But by what? A force that answered no call, obeyed no law, and offered no explanation. They felt not rescued, but overlooked by a reaper whose scythe had bounced off an invisible, uncaring wall. Back in the cosmic plane, the entities observed the entire sequence. They had their answer. He had acted, but not out of responsibility, not out of duty, not out of love for that world or its people. He had acted because, in a moment of quiet contemplation, he had chosen to. A whim of the absolute, a flick of a god's finger for reasons utterly inscrutable, perhaps even to himself. He had preserved the infection not because he valued it, but because he felt like it. It was the most terrifying thing they had ever witnessed. Destruction was predictable. Chaos had patterns. Even love and sacrifice were variables that could be modeled. But a truly free choice from a being unbound by any system, any consequence, any need, that was the ultimate anomaly. Cliffhanger. The cosmic manifestations did not fade in victory or defeat. They withdrew. Their presence simply unraveled from the plane, their attention retracting back into their eternal domains. They left behind no judgment, no decree, only the scarred plane and a new, unsettling datum now woven into the fabric of cosmic understanding. A being for whom the great sacred cycle of power and responsibility was not a universal law, but a personal, fleeting option. And an option, by its very nature, could not be governed, predicted, or balanced. On Earth, the world was saved, but a quiet, profound sickness of the soul settled over every being sensitive enough to have felt the event. They had not been saved by a hero or a god. They had been spared by a force of nature that did not believe in salvation, only in its own passing whims. The universe had issued its verdict, and the verdict had been ignored. What do you do when the strongest makes a choice, and the choice is as meaningless and as absolute as a stone falling in an empty sky? The aftermath wasn't physical. The park bore no scars, save for the perfectly circular burn of Thor's lightning, a mundane wonder for conspiracy theorists to ponder. Thor's hammer had returned to his palm the instant the boundless infinity was lifted from the planet, as if it had never been waylaid. Captain Marvel landed softly on unbroken concrete. Doctor Strange's spells responded to his will with their familiar, costly fluency. The world on the surface was precisely as it had been. The damage was philosophical, a hairline fracture in the collective psyche of the powerful, spreading silently, irreparably through the bedrock of their understanding. In the days and weeks that followed, the event was buried under a mountain of bureaucratic obfuscation. It was classified under a dozen contradictory code names: Operation Blank Slate, Event Null Gravity, the Paradox Incident. The official story, disseminated through trusted channels, spoke of a contained cosmic glitch, a localized reality fluctuation, successfully neutralized by the coordinated efforts of the Avengers and the Sorcerer Supreme. It was a neat, heroic tale. No one with clearance above level 8 believed a word of it. The data was too clean, too absolute in its impossibility. The sensor logs showing the planetary shield, a perfect, all-frequency blackout that appeared and vanished without energy signature. The deep space monitors that recorded the annihilating entropy wave approach, impact, and then cease without dissipation. It was a subtraction with no remainder. The silence from the usual cosmic chatterboxes, the Watcher, the abstract entities, was a deafening corroboration. The truth was not in the reports, but in the quiet spaces between the lines, in the way seasoned analysts and veteran mystics now avoided each other's eyes. The truth was a whisper that said, something looked at the rules, found them optional, and left. In a dark Malibu lab, the only light came from hovering holograms. Tony Stark sat amidst them, a ghost in the pale blue glow. One display showed the frozen repulsor beam from Matrix's gauntlet stretched into a futile cone. Another played the quantum analysis of the infinity field, a graph that dove asymptotically towards zero. A third was a psychological model running endlessly. Friday. Stark's voice was hoarse from silence. Run the altruism probability matrix again. Cross-reference with every known intervention event, from Thor's landing in New Mexico to the snap reversal. Factor in power level, perceived threat, and implied moral framework. Time =sign 0.6s. Running, boss. The AI's voice was soft, almost respectful. Seconds ticked by. Analysis complete. The entity's final protective action correlates with 0 known motivational profiles. There is no statistical link to Earth-centric morality, territorial ownership, emotional attachment to any life form, or a discernible ethical system. There is no evidence of perceived debt, reciprocal obligation, or hierarchical duty. Stark leaned forward, his face etched in the hologram's light. What's the closest analog? There has to be something. The closest behavioral analog in the database, Friday stated, pausing for a microsecond, is a human subject brushing a speck of dust from their sleeve. A minor, autonomous action to remove a trivial, transient nuisance. An act of casual, almost subconscious tidiness. Stark leaned back, the chair groaning. He stared past the holograms into the impenetrable dark of the unlit workshop. The words hung in the air, colder than vacuum. We were dust, he whispered to no one. The whole planet. A piece of lint on the cosmic jacket. And he flicked us off. The genius, the futurist, the man who built suits of armor to control the threats, had encountered a power that didn't recognize the concept of a threat. It was a humiliation deeper than any defeat. On the shining, rebuilt balconies of New Asgard, Thor Odinson sat not on his throne, but on the stone steps leading to the sea. The newly reforged Mjolnir lay beside him, its runes cool and silent. He looked at it, this symbol of his worth, his burden, his identity. He thought of the question, so simple it had felt like a child's stone thrown through a stained glass window. Why? He thought of Odin's stern lessons on the burden of the crown, of Loki's chaotic laughter that masked a deeper pain, of his own long journey from arrogant prince to grieving brother to weary king. The weight of the hammer, of the throne, of the people. It had always felt like the very gravity of his soul, the thing that kept him rooted, that gave his immense strength, meaning, and direction. Now, for the first time in 1500 years, the weight felt like an object, a thing separate from himself, a beautifully crafted, immensely powerful tool that he carried. The thought followed, unbidden and terrifying. What if I put it down? Not in defeat, not in abdication, but simply because I could. Because the power to lift it was always mine, not the hammer's. The chain linking power to duty, which he had always believed was forged by the Norns themselves, now felt suspiciously like something he had helped to weld, link by painful link, over centuries of loss. The fear that struck him was not of a monster or an invasion, but of a vertiginous, limitless freedom. A sky with no up or down. In the sanctum sanctorum, Stephen Strange sought the solace of meditation. The air was thick with the scent of old knowledge and dried herbs. The cloak of levitation rested on his shoulders, but its usual sentient, comforting presence felt uneasy. It kept shifting its collar, as if trying to find a comfortable position on a new kind of man. Strange tried to focus on the familiar currents of mystical energy, the comforting, complex rules that governed reality's deeper layers. But the laws of magic now felt flexible, not broken, but suddenly revealed as possessing a give, a malleability he had never before dared to contemplate. Had they always been this way? Had the ancient ironclad rules of Vishanti and Sidarak and the Faltine always been more like strong suggestions upheld by collective belief and the fear of the cost? He remembered the feeling of the crimson bands of Sidarak, a spell of absolute binding, dissolving into meaningless slack loops, not countered, not broken, ignored on a fundamental level. He had built his entire second life, his redemption from arrogance, on the mastery of rules. He had traded a surgeon's precise control over flesh for a sorcerer's precise control over reality's laws. What did a master do when he discovered the rulebook was written in pencil? The certainty that had been his anchor was now adrift. His hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly in his lap. Carol Danvers flew a patrol route at the edge of the solar system, a golden sentinel against the black. The power of a sunstorm lived within her, a constant, roaring potential. She felt it, as always, the leash, the conscious, disciplined control she exerted every moment of every day, a mental grip on a reactor that wanted to flood the universe with its light. It was focus. It was responsibility. It was the price of not becoming a loose cannon. She remembered the sensation from the park, the hypersonic sprint that became an infinite treadmill. The harder she pushed, the more space denied her. It wasn't a wall. It was the universe itself saying, "Your effort is irrelevant here." A thought, heretical and fleeting, pierced her disciplined mind. What would it feel like to let go? Not of control, to cause destruction, but to be free from the very need to control? To have power that was not a contained reaction, but a natural state? To be not a reactor, but a star at peace with its own fusion? The thought was seductive and terrifying. It tasted like absolute solitude. The cosmic entities did not return. There was no judgment, no follow-up, no adjustment to the universal constants. Their silence was deeper and more unnerving than any apocalyptic verdict. It was the silence of a vast, ancient system encountering an error code it could not parse, and so deciding, with infinite coldness, to quarantine it by ignoring its existence. The universe itself seemed to hold its breath around the memory of him, a skipped heartbeat in the cosmic pulse. The great balance continued, but those who tended it now worked with the quiet anxiety of gardeners who had glimpsed a weed that could not be pulled, one that existed by a logic prior to soil and season. And Gojo Satoru? He was seen one last time, not by gamma ray spectrometers or mystical scrying pools, not by the all seeing eye of a satellite or a god, by a young woman named Anya, closing up a small, independent coffee shop long after midnight. Wiping down the last table, she looked through the glass front to the deserted street. At the bus stop under the man with shockingly white hair. He wore simple black clothes. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was just sitting, his head tilted back, looking up at the moon with an expression she couldn't quite name. Not wonder, not longing. Contemplation, perhaps. He seemed, in that moment, profoundly ordinary, even lonely. As she locked the door, he turned. The streetlight glinted off the black band over his eyes. He saw her looking. For a second, they were just two people in the quiet of the night. Then he offered a small, two-fingered wave, a friendly, entirely human gesture. It held no cosmic weight, no hidden meaning. It was just a wave. At that moment, with a diesel grumble and a sigh of hydraulics, the night bus arrived. It was the number 47, its schedule patchy and unreliable after 1 a.m. The doors hissed open. The man stood up, gave a last glance at the moon, then stepped onto the bus. The doors closed with a definitive thud. Anya shrugged, pulling her coat tight. She began walking the other way. At the corner, she glanced back. The bus was halfway down the next block. She saw its tail lights as it turned the corner. When she looked down that cross street a moment later, it was empty. No bus, no taillights, no sound of an engine. Just a quiet, sleeping street. It had not vanished in a flash. It had not torn a hole in space. It was simply no longer there. As if it had never been part of this timeline schedule, its arrival and departure a transient, self-contained bubble of coincidence that had now popped. He had chosen to be elsewhere, and reality, as it always had in his presence, had simply acquiesced. It was the gentlest, most chilling departure imaginable. He was gone. But his presence lingered, not as a ghost or a legend, but as a crack in the world's certainties. A whispering, persistent question that now echoed in the silent moments of those who wielded power. What are your chains made of? Is duty a choice or a cage you've learned to call home? Is sacrifice the price of power or a story you tell to make the weight bearable? Who told you the limits were real? And what would you be if you ever dared to believe they weren't? The Marvel Universe is built on a foundational creed. Everything must be earned. Every ounce of power is paid for in sacrifice, tempered by trauma, watched over by jealous gods, and entered into the eternal ledger of cosmic balance. It is a universe of magnificent, tragic economy. Its greatest heroes are those who carry the heaviest debts. Its most profound stories are about the cost. Limits are not just physical, they are moral, emotional, sacred. They are the walls that make the room feel safe. Gojo Satoru was a man who never received that memo. He did not break their rules. He existed in a parallel conversation their physics and their philosophies could not hear. To him, their grand symphony of sacrifice and responsibility, the very music that gave their lives meaning, sounded like a beautiful, complicated dirge. He hummed a different tune entirely, a single, clear, limitless note of pure potential. He was not a hero. Heroes are defined by their choices within the system. He was not a villain. Villains rebel against the system's rules. He was not a god. Gods are personifications of the system's aspects. He was not a monster. Monsters are violations the system must correct. He was simply free, unbound, unbought, unbalanced. And in a universe meticulously constructed upon the comforting, terrifying idea of control, self-control, societal control, mystical control, cosmic control, that was the most profoundly unsettling thing of all. Final image: an empty bench in a quiet park, weeks later. Morning sun filters through the oak tree. A single brittle autumn leaf, caught in a spider's web woven between the slats, trembles in a gentle breeze. It is a perfectly ordinary scene, a snapshot of serene mundanity. But now, for those who know, for Strange, for Thor, for Tony in his lab, for Carol among the stars, they cannot look upon such a scene without the quiet, creeping doubt. As they watch the leaf tremble a fraction of an inch from the wooden bench, the question insinuates itself. Is the space between that leaf and the bench truly finite? Or is there an infinity hiding there, a boundless gulf in miniature, waiting only for someone with the eyes to see it, and the casual, unyielding will to insist upon it? The story ends not with a bang, a revelation, or a resolution. It ends with a quiet, lingering doubt, now woven like a new thread into the fabric of reality itself. A doubt that whispers, perhaps the chains are not locked. Perhaps the walls are not stone. Perhaps the strongest thing in any universe is not the power to move worlds, but the quiet, terrifying freedom to choose not to. The leaf trembles. The space holds its breath. And somewhere, in the silence between moments, a man with white hair is smiling.